that have spoken out. They've spoken quite a very mouthful, and I would actually think that they went through what I was about to say. But without repeating what they have said, I would like to bring it to your attention that the GTMI is Gauteng Technical Manufacturing Initiative. In Gauteng Technical Manufacturing Initiative, we specialize with transformation, modernization, and reindustrialization. Now, when it comes to transformation, we strongly believe that you cannot transform without the skills. For you to transform, you need to work on two types of skills: the physical skill that you can touch and see, and the mental skills. Because when you look into most of the organizations that we intervene into, you would realize that most of them, it's a matter of them having to do a repetitive work. But how we get to work around it is that we have to get to a point where we introduce a new component of skills. I'll come a little bit again on that. And again, we talk about modernization. As you know, that we are now into the fourth industrial revolution, which requires us to adapt into ways of doing things, which requires the industry, particularly the manufacturing industry. It's very difficult for most of the manufacturing industries to adapt to technology. Because remember that the type of services, or rather the type of products that they're manufacturing, is tangible products. And the systems and the equipment which is there is the equipment that is being used and has been used even when time changes over and over again. So you can imagine what we go through. We go through a platform where you have this particular individual with this particular set of skill that have been operating for 20 years. And again, you move into the next generation whereby things are more digital, things are more onto the computer than on hands. So what we do as GTMI, we go to companies out there and we look into what type of skills can we put in, what type of systems can we enroll in. But at the same time, we identify the gap. Now, when we identify the gap, that is whereby now we look into what type of people that we should train, which ones are needed in industry. But our main role is to identify the need, because without the need, we strongly believe that you cannot do anything. But now, when we look into the skills transformation, we're looking into three phases. One of the three phases that we look at, firstly, is the identification. We strongly believe that you cannot solve a skill that you haven't identified. So there's a great need for you to identify the right relevant skill. And after the identification, then we can talk about developing that particular skill. I like the previous speaker that made mention that the board needs to be trained as well. The managers need to be trained as well. Not only that we need to assume that people already know things, because what's happening in industry is that people get employed under the impression that they are skilled for the work, under the impression that they've experienced. And of course, yes, they do have experience, but where they're going is a different platform, which requires a different tactic and it's a different environment. But when we know how to identify the right skill, then we'll be able to know which content should we put in onto that right skill. From after that content that you have put in, then we know how to further develop it. Remember, there's a huge difference that between development and identification. Once we speak of identification and development, and whatever that you develop is fully derived by what you have identified, which will therefore inform the content in which you develop. Therefore, we look into how do we best provide the right tools. We believe that at this current situation, there's a huge need for our nation, not only our nation, for global, to change the way things are, to change the platform in which skill is actually shared out there. Most of the people, they will go by the route of saying, this is a customized book of some sort, that this is what you need to learn. But let us take cognizance that before that book was written and now that it's written, there's a huge difference that is there. I like the approach in which now we're getting into, whereby we are enforced for industrial revolution. We are forced to have these virtual conferences. And in doing so, we also look into the third step to say that, fine, you have identified what is it that you need to input onto this particular students or into these particular people. Then you move now to the development. How are you going to develop going forward? It doesn't end there. It also goes as far as monitoring what you have developed. So it's a whole complete value chain. Once you monitor what you have developed, you'll be in position to identify a continuous improvement out of it. Therefore, we request in everyone that is there to look into the three aspects: identify, develop, and also monitor. But again, let me bring it to your attention that out of the trials that we have done, we did a run to see how our model gets to work. Is it applicable or is it just hypothetical? And what we have realized is that we enrolled 3,834 people over the past financial year in different types of fields. So we've powered different types of community members in attempt to see what is it that we can bring as an impact out of what we've put out there. And we came out to say, look, it's not only the skill that's required, but also the mental capacity. If you train a person who's actually ready to be trained, there's two different types of people that are there. There are those who get trained because of they found an opportunity. There are those who get trained because they need the training. Then there are those who get trained because they've got nothing to do. So those type of three categories, you realize that we get a different feedback, and that feedback imposes or rather challenges the impact of any program that is out there. But nevertheless, we will welcome a situation whereby we get to make our people to be in a point where they see a skill not as an element to get a job. They see a skill as an element for growth, and thus they have the appetite to grow even further than that without going or rather expanding on that. The GTMI's mandate is mainly to radically transform, modernize, and reindustrialize, and the technical manufacturing sector with an emphasis of empowerment. So empowerment is embedded within us. But now, under this dispensation, particularly under this current situation of COVID, we have been looking into how do we drastically introduce business continuity in such that it benefits the entities that were dilapidated or rather that are about to fall. And in that, what type of skills, what type of developments are we going to put in such that those companies, they get to resuscitate without having to utilize a huge budget or without having to utilize a huge chunk of a lot of intervention factors. Now we're looking into if we package the business in a box, and packaging the business in a box in terms of business continuity, we believe that we can be able to provide more of a briefcase approach to certain entities at no cost, at a very reasonable way of doing business. But in doing so, we are again engaging in the skills in which we have to make sure that we take the people that we have trained, which is the 3,834 people, and we put them into that business in a box, and we assign them to see if they cannot assist the organization into helping the companies that are dilapidated. So skills remain part of the most critical thing out of everything. Thank you.